All right, thank you all for coming. I am Paul Evans, running for House District 20, and I'm on this side because I'm the lone Democrat in this particular primary campaign, so I'm running against myself. But it is an opportunity to sit and talk about issues that we'll be talking about, I'm sure, in the fall, and I just want to thank everybody that made this happen. Thanks to ASWU, thank you, Commissioner Wheeler, for making this happen, and the Executive Director of the Monmouth Independence Chamber, Director Love, thank you for making this happen. I believe this campaign really boils down to three things. I'm running, hopefully, to emphasize service, leadership, and experience. I am from Monmouth. I was born in Salem, but I was raised in Monmouth, went to the public schools here, graduated from Western, went in the Air Force after that, came back. Was fortunate to be mayor of Monmouth for about 4 years until tragedy struck and some people drove airplanes into buildings, and I was called back into the Air Force. Came back after that and got back into teaching, served on the school board for a while, served Governor Kulongoski, and most recently have been teaching full-time at Chemeketa Community College with part-time teaching at Oregon State and at Western. To introduce me very briefly, I'm a person who believes that government is best celebrated in moments like this, where on a Friday afternoon people come together and talk about the issues that actually matter in a very polite and constructive way, as opposed to what we've seen politics become over the past several years. So I'm going to keep my introduction relatively short and just thank everybody for coming. Looking forward to the question and answer process, and I invite anybody that wants to know more about my particular campaign to www.paulevans.org. Thank you for this opportunity. I hope to earn your support.
Sounds like I'm up. Can you hear me all right? Good. Okay, I'm Kathy Goss, and I also am running for District 20. I'm a Republican, as are my other campaign friends to my left. And one of us at the end of this will, as of next Tuesday, will be running against Mr. Evans on my right. So, tell you a little about me. I have a vision for Oregon, and I have a vision of what I might be able to accomplish and contribute if I'm elected to the legislature. I want the lowest unemployment rate in the country, and believe me, we're a long ways away from it right now. I want the best school system. We also have lots to do in our school system, and I want the highest accountability for public entities that spend our tax dollars. Starting with the first one, what would I do for education? I would try very hard to extend the day. Right now, Oregon overall has the least amount of days, the very minimum actually in class. And this kind of cuts below a lot of the students I see here. You're a little past that now. But in K through 12, we're very limited in time, and I would push hard to have kids spend more time in their chairs, in the classroom, receiving education. Quite frankly, we don't need to hire any more Rudy Cruzes to come along and pay them $250,000. I think we know here in Oregon what we need to do. We need to spend more time right there. I also think one of my main positions is to have children able to read by third grade. And I think that's possible. The governor now has a 40-40-20 plan he's calling for. That's 40% college graduates, 40% two-year graduates, and 20% that will probably do other things. We're a long ways from that in Oregon. And to speak to the college students here, I think it's very important that you know that Oregon does not have the jobs available to last long enough for you to accept them. You're more than likely, and statistics show, that you will have to go out of state to find a job that pays you what your job after you've graduated from college should pay you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm James Owens, running along here with my fellow Republican candidates. I think we've got a good group here. You know, I want to start also by thanking the ASVU team for setting this up. I think it's important for students to be involved in this process, especially now because the decisions that we as legislators would make has a very profound impact on you in particular, especially in education and healthcare. It was probably about 10 years ago that I was here in this school, actually over in the Warner University Center, that I saw Vicki Berger speak for the first time. Now she's the current representative in this district and she's retiring. Little did I know that one day I'd be running to replace her. Vicki's leaving some very big shoes to fill in the legislature because Vicki's really had a very distinguished career as a moderate, someone who can work across the aisle, and she can really bring people together despite the division that seems to be ever-growing between Democrats and Republicans. More recently, as the co-founder of Freedom Oregon, I had the pleasure of working with Vicki on marriage equality. We formed Freedom Oregon. It's an organization that brings together Republicans, conservatives, and liberty-minded independents who all believe in the freedom to marry for everyone. Vicki was the first Republican legislator to sign on to Freedom Oregon, and I mention that because I think it speaks well of Vicki, and as a young Republican, I, like Vicki, understand that the party needs to move beyond some social issues if we're to remain a viable party. I think a lot of people, most people in this room could probably agree that the government, certainly the state government, is in need of new ideas and a fresh perspective. I'm a small business owner. I understand how government can help and hinder growth and jobs. I think that to ensure we have a healthy economy, we need to create an environment that encourages growth, and I don't think that's what's happening right now. Also, like Paul, graduated here with a degree in economics. I also serve part-time in the Oregon Air National Guard, so I have an understanding of what it means for soldiers, airmen, sailors, and Marines that come home from war. And that would be one of my goals in the legislature is to make sure all of our service members and families get the financial, legal, and emotional support that they need. Somebody who's a product of our local public schools, I feel very strongly about Oregon's education. So, James Owens, you can check my website out at owensfororegon.com. Thank you.
I love the timekeeper down here. He's got a tough job, you know, and keep us all in line. Have you ever said anything that got you in trouble? Well, the reason I'm here is because, yeah, exactly, we all have, right? I complained about the state government and the absolute tragedy it is in the wasteful spending. Oregon is in the top 17% in taxation. They tax us more than most of the other states. And they're also in the upper 10% of the states that waste our money. So coming from a background of business and technology, I've solved these kind of problems my entire life for large companies and regional and national companies. I've started my own business several times. I started a software development company when I first graduated out of school. I run a restaurant, a lot of just small companies as I've gone through. But in the process, I decided to go down and actually interview the state IT department to find out how in the world you could mess up a project like Cover Oregon. And I was shocked to find out that for Cover Oregon, they had 3 different departments that were all writing the same software program. They didn't communicate with each other, and not one of those 3 was in charge of the program. They had no leadership, they had no accountability, and they had no personal responsibility for the programs that were written. If that would have happened in any company, in the United States, that whole department would have been fired. To allow that in the state is just absolutely inexcusable. And so as I complained about that, all of my friends said, okay, you have to do something about it. You know what needs to be done. You know how to do it. You have the guts to stand up and make stuff happen. We want you to run for this legislative District 20. So here I am. I'm going to be more careful what I say next time, right? The other thing that I noticed as a student of politics and as a student of the Constitution is that our state is put itself in a position where we have an opportunity to make a lot of great changes in the state that will help bring more prosperity to the state as well as bring more jobs to the state if we have the right people in place that will be able to put those things into practice. I know how to bring jobs into the state, and the reason that I do is because I've followed 3 states that have been very successful at doing this, and I've run out of time, so you'll have to ask me how. I'm Terrence Taylor. I'm running for District 20, and you can find my website at terrenceoforegon.com. Thank you.
Okay, the first question, this is for each of you. We'll start with Kathy Goss. Do you stand with the 60 faith communities and 215 faith leaders in Oregon, among other broad business coalitions, that support the freedom to marry for all loving and committed couples?
That's an interesting and controversial issue right now, as we all know. And quite frankly, Oregon has lots of problems to solve, lots of economic problems, lots of environmental problems, lots of problems attracting jobs to this state. So my choice, and I'll be forthright about it, I've been criticized by some of my friends for that. I don't believe now's the time to make a choice. The issue is in the courts. As most of you know, there's a constitutional issue in Oregon about gay marriage. And the Constitution of Oregon defines marriage as a man and a woman. So that's in the lap of the judge right now. And I think it's kind of inappropriate for me to come in and make a decision and say, this is the way I believe. Frankly, all of us will be bound by the law in the state of Oregon when that judge issues his decision. And until that happens, I'm not going to say my personal belief really doesn't matter here. What matters is me upholding the law for the state of Oregon.
Am I next?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Like I had mentioned in my speech, the first time I really worked with Vicki Berger, the current representative, was on Freedom Oregon. And the purpose of Freedom Oregon was to bring together, like I said, Republicans, conservatives who believe in marriage equality for everyone. I also founded and currently chair the Log Cabin Republicans of Oregon, which is a gay Republican organization. So, that being said, of course, I am for marriage equality. I think as it sits, in the courts right now, I think we can expect that the judge will make a swift decision on that, and we can be past that. And I think that'll be a great thing for Oregon. Also in terms of the Republican Party, it's we have really great ideas when it comes to the way we educate, the way we implement healthcare ideas. Things like transparency and lower taxes. We have really good ideas as Republicans, but unfortunately, younger generations can't look past this wedge issue that is gay marriage and other social issues. And so I think if we can move past that as a party, we have a better chance of remaining relevant. That's where I stand.
Well, I'm, I guess, the only Republican that'll stand up and say, I actually support the Republican stand which is marriage is defined as a union between a man and a woman. It's been that way for the last 5,000 years. And I don't think that it's appropriate to try to change the definition. We already give the 4% all of the opportunities and all of the advantages that a married couple gets with the union that they're able to have right now. So I think that more than anything, it's kind of as much as it's a political issue, it's also a moral issue. And I think that as we look at the moral issue, we need to respect and love everybody, and everybody should have the opportunities to do what they need to do. But it's kind of like Abraham Lincoln said, if you call a lamb's tail a leg, how many legs does a lamb have? And the answer is 4. Just calling it a leg doesn't make it a leg. And changing the definition of marriage to try to conform to the 4%, I don't believe is a right thing to do.
As the lone Democrat up here, I'm pretty sure I'm speaking for the Democratic Party because I'm the only one running in the primary on this one. But I'm absolutely for extending marriage equality to any adult that wants to marry another adult. And here's why. And actually, here's why I think it needs to happen sooner than later. I agree with part of what was said. I think this is very much about morality and very much about values. It's about what kind of a country we want to be. And I believe in my faith, though I'm certainly not, and those in my church know I'm not a great example of always living up to the parts of my faith that I wish I could. But my faith is about love. And if what's really at issue is who can love who in a safe and responsible way, which I think this is what it's about, then I'm proud that we're actually living in a society that can bring this issue up, get it passed, and move forward. Because love is not such a bad thing to build a society upon. Thank you.
So we're going to start with Mr. Owens. What is your plan to reinvest in higher education funding and reduce tuition prices?
It's that's a great question because, Oregon, are you talking, was that specifically to higher education or
Yes.
does that include K through 12? No.
That was specifically for higher education.
Okay. Well, I think one of the smart things that this university in particular has done has made the tuition promise, where, as far as I've been told, this wasn't a program when I was here, but from what I've been told, once you are admitted to the school, you have a tuition rate, and that doesn't change throughout the 4 years that you're here. And I think that's one great idea to keep tuition from spiraling out of control for students. Debt is another thing. That's something that I have. I have debt from college because my parents weren't able to afford to pay my tuition while I went to school, so I had to take out loans. These sorts of things that students deal with after college isn't something that's really explained to them while they're going to school, something you kind of have to figure out after you graduate. And in this job market where it's hard to get a job, even with a degree, that just compounds the problem. And so tackling the debt, I think, is going to be one of the first things that we need to do in Oregon for college graduates. And there are many ways that we could tackle that. I don't have specific ideas on of course we're not going to eliminate all of the debt that students have, but some programs that we could implement in terms of how students pay them back, what sorts of jobs and some things like that, like nonprofits. So I'm done.
That's the bill. Do you want to repeat that question?
Sure. What is your plan to reinvest in higher education funding and reduce tuition prices?
Okay, so I guess one of the things that I look at is I think that we really need to try to separate government from education funding. I think that we need to try to allow the schools to be able to have programs that meet the needs of the students for the various areas that they go into, and be affordable for them to be able to have that education. I think the real question is how do you pay your loans back? And that gets back to the economy issue. We need to have more jobs in the state of Oregon. We need to have higher paying jobs in the state of Oregon, and we need to have a healthier economy. And if you look at the ability for you to be able to pay that loan back, it's strictly contingent on your ability to be able to get a job that pays you a fair enough wage to be able to do that. And I think that's the real answer to the question. I think schools do a great job in trying to make it as affordable as they can possibly do. And for schools to try to skimp or try to move that in some way to compromise, I think is probably the wrong ticket. I think what we really need to do is concentrate on the economy so that when you graduate in the course that you're studying, you're able to pay that loan back. That's about all I have to say about that.
How many minutes do I have?
2.
2. All right, I'll try to be very brief. I actually believe just the opposite. And I believed this before I was a teacher, so there's no emphasis on that. When it comes to higher education, there's a couple of things first to remember. Number one, we have disinvested in higher education across the board since ballot measure 5 and 4750 started starving the budget because of the requirement to put K-12 funding above everything else. That's fact number one. Fact number two is that if you look in history, the times that the country has actually put more money and resources into college and apprenticeships and workforce training was actually the engine for the greatest expansion of individual and collective wealth in human history. That would be the economy following World War II because of the GI Bill. We are either going to have an investment in today, tomorrow, and the future, or we're going to allow education to become something that is only the possibility for the rich. And quite frankly, everybody prospers. I believe this. Everybody prospers when everybody has access to education and workforce training. You know, interestingly enough, we've talked about the economy. Oregon's leading the nation right now in productivity. Look it up. It's kind of interesting. From 2001 to 2012, we've actually increased productivity 46% compared to the national average of 9%. I do the math. That's about 5 times the national average. Perhaps it's not that our workers aren't working harder. Perhaps it's not that we're not generating wealth. Perhaps we have to actually look at how we have systems and structures in place to make sure that opportunities are available. 70% of the jobs that have come back since we've had the Great Recession, we've had about 70% of the jobs come back, but they're actually less than living wage standard. It makes it hard for kids to go to college on that.
Actually, I agree 100% with Mr. Taylor, and that hasn't often happened, but it's happening now. I want to read you a little piece that I noticed this morning. It comes from the Oregonian. It says, the trends in Oregon are producing jobs that dominate the economy. They're low-skilled jobs, they're low-skilled jobs and occupations. Those that are featured, the first 4 are retail sales, food preparation and serving, waiters and waitresses, and cashiers. Not one of those jobs or those trends fits higher education. I want to see you have a life where you can use your higher education. And those are professional jobs. They're jobs that companies provide. They're CEOs, they're general managers, or they're teachers, or they're nurses, or there's all kinds of things. The problem is that Oregon is not growing that kind of job. And that's what I think I can change. And I'm going to do that by eliminating capital gains taxes. I'm going to also, it's called the tax trifecta. One is capital gains. You pay that if you buy a large building and you leave. The other one is inheritance tax, and the last one is to bring down the base tax level. And if we can provide good jobs for you, then you can pay your college loans.
Okay, this question will start with Mr. Taylor. What is your stance on increased limitations to gun ownership?
There's a reason that the Second Amendment is in the Constitution. If you look at the original intent of the Founding Fathers, the reason that they put that in there was because the oppression they received from Great Britain. The first thing that Great Britain did in 1774 was to come in and ban the guns coming into the United States. And then in 1775, they actually started taking guns away from the citizens in the United States. And of course, we all know what happened in 1776. They attacked us. So our founding fathers knew that if we had people that had arms, that no government would ever be able to oppress them, no government would be able to take them, and that we would remain free. As you look around the world today, the country that has the least amount of crime is a small little country called Switzerland. Switzerland has a really interesting process. When you turn 17 and you're a male, you learn how to use a rifle and you become a part of the military. And then after you get out of the military, you have a responsibility to continue to have a firearm and maintain it in your household. Do you know that they have hardly any burglaries? They have hardly any murders? And a part of the reason is because they have a well-armed citizenship. When you restrict gun ownership, you allow criminals to feed upon unarmed people. Our founding fathers were smart enough to know that, and that's why they put the Second Amendment in there, and that's why I support it.
Okay, the Second Amendment was actually put in place to make sure that no one could take guns away from the militia. But history aside, I think I'm probably the only one up here with a concealed handgun license on me, and I'm pretty sure I'm the only guy right now with there's two of us, with a truck that already has a gun in it. So I live in Polk County. I like chainsaws. I like guns. The question is not whether or not guns should be legal, because I think that's been settled. The question is whether we as a society can come up with ways to make sure that we make every place safer, whether we can make sure that people that shouldn't have weapons don't, and whether we can make sure that people that do have guns use them more responsibly. We can't blame people that didn't do anything wrong. On the same token, we have to be careful of creating a cult of personality around a firearm. It is a tool. It is only a tool. I had to carry that tool in a past life. It's important to remember that the liberty provided us to have weapons does not mean that it is a liberty to use it to threaten. And it's also, I think, unfortunately become a litmus test and a arguing point when we do have larger things to talk about and more important issues to talk about. But for the record, I don't believe we should take guns away. I do believe in the Second Amendment. I've never voted against a gun ordinance, but I do believe that responsible people are pretty reasonable, and I think we need to work in that direction.
I don't own a gun, have never owned a gun, but my family does. And I believe in the right to own a gun, and I'm not willing to give that up. In my opinion, we have enough anti-gun laws right now. I think the problem is that we don't identify mental health. If you look back at the large gun incidences that have happened, oftentimes it's a disturbed person. Oftentimes even they were identified by their parents. And the parents were just sick that they couldn't find anything to do with that child or young adult. I think we need to work on having avenues for people that are hindered by mental health problems. And I would certainly do that before I put money down to have more gun laws, to have more government enforce those restrictions. I don't believe in that.
Well, I actually agree with Kathy a great deal on that. We need to address the mental health issues that go along with these violent crimes that are happening seemingly more frequently. I don't think anyone necessarily agrees with taking away guns. I don't believe I've ever heard of a bill proposed or any sort of legislation proposed that would take guns away from people. Most of the issues that come up when voting on gun rights is registration, registering your firearm with the state or the local government or what have you. And Second Amendment people, of which I'm one. Of course, Second Amendment right to bear arms. I'm all for it. But the registering of it seems to be the direction that we're going. And I would just ask this question of anybody who is considering a gun registration bill: is that when you have law-abiding citizens who do carry a weapon, like Mr. Evans here, they will follow the law. They will register their gun if that's the law. It's the people who are already going to commit the crimes who won't register anyway. So I'm not quite sure what purpose registering firearms would necessarily have. But to sum it up, I'm a strong believer in the Second Amendment, and I think all of us are.
We're going to start with Mr. Evans for this question. Do you support a rise in the minimum wage to help keep pace with the rising costs of basic necessities as well as for working families?
Yes, I do. I actually believe very much in raising the minimum wage, and here's why. First, to quote some folks that are out there advocating growth in the economy, I concur with those that say you can't raise a family on $10 an hour. I believe that our economy is complex, that costs continue to go up, and that while the minimum wage is not the solution, and I do not pretend that it is the solution, it is so far out of whack right now that it should be adjusted. But more importantly, I want to emphasize a couple of things having to do with the economy right now. I continue to hear how the Oregon economy is bad, and it's not as good as it should be. And as someone who was laid off during the Great Recession, I concur with that. But another statistic, again, in case you're trying to find where this is from, it's the Oregon Center for Public Policy. You can find it, it's out there. From 2001 to 2012, Oregon's share of the national economy actually went up from 1.04% to 1.40%. Now that isn't a lot, but if you look at the size and scale of the United States economy, we are doing some things right. And my concern is, as we start finding solutions, we start trying to find change, let's make sure we do it with reasonableness and rational approaches. As a former mayor, as a former school board member, I've had to make decisions in government where you have to make sure and look at all the finer points, not just the major themes. And one of the things we have to protect is the slow but steady growth that is occurring in Oregon, and make sure that we don't lose that even as we try to fix the other problems. Thank you.
The political correct thing these days to say is, yes, I believe in minimum wage, but I'll have to admit that's really hard for me to swallow. My husband and I own an appraisal company, and when we need appraisers, if there's no one there, we need to train them. And we take younger people and train them to be appraisers. They have to take classes, they have to have a bachelor's degree, and all these things. It costs me a lot of money. It takes at least 6 months to take a college graduate and train them to be an appraiser so that they can appraise enough so I can make some money again. And so to me, it does not make sense. It's not an improvement of our economy. And when we look back at 2001 to 2012, I know what happened in 2008. And people are hungry. They're still hungry now. I drive through Independence and you have open storefronts. I drive through Salem and we have open storefronts. I would really rather work on that problem. I'm still of the feeling that the harder people work, the more that they can contribute to the employer that's there, the business that's there, then I'm happy to wait to raise the wage. And I don't think anybody ever was meant to live on a minimum wage. I would hope and encourage people to get out of that so they can be reimbursed or paid a little more.
As a student of economics, I've read several papers on the effectiveness of raising the minimum wage, and they're all over the map. There have been, many peer-reviewed studies on whether or not the minimum wage actually impacts job growth, impacts the economy. So, you can take the argument both ways, but I think the fact is that if you have a minimum wage and you raise it, prices will follow, and it just keeps notching up. So I think it's a wash most of the times. I think we get caught up way too much in talking about the minimum wage. But in terms of keeping up with the economic growth, I do agree with Kathy. I don't think it's necessarily that we need to keep raising the minimum wage. I think we need to have a strong economy, and those wages will just follow. And people shouldn't be relying on a minimum wage job. That should be a right out of high school wage. You shouldn't be 40 years old and in a minimum wage job. So I think we should probably address that issue first.
Well, I think you can see this pretty clear that the Democrats believe that fixing the problem is you increase the minimum wage, and that's somehow going to fix a business problem. Being a professional businessman all my life, I can tell you that that's only going to create a problem. Because if you raise somebody from $7 to $10, the guy who's making $11, how do you think he's going to feel? And then the guy who's making $12, he goes, they got a 30% raise, how come I'm not getting a raise? And then if you look at the labor costs for the company, the only way that they can offset that is to raise the price of their product. So it's an absolute insane idea. Anybody that really understands economics, understands business, knows that this is just throwing fluff out there for people that are desperate right now because the economy isn't where it's supposed to be. Even though Paul has some statistics that he says that Oregon is doing great, I think that we can all look out there and say, you know what, it's not doing as great as it should be. And we need to start really looking at the economy. We need to look at ways of bringing businesses into the state and make things work. And hopefully that's a question.
Okay, we'll start this one with Kathy. Do you support the restoration of driver's licenses to all Oregon residents who meet the qualifications for a standard license, regardless of ability to prove citizenship or legal status, to help create safe roads and a strong economy?
Well, thank you. This is probably the most controversial issue we have in the state of Oregon right now. And the last legislature did authorize issuing those driver's license or driver's cards to non-citizens. So I can absolutely see both sides of this. I understand both sides. On one side, you have illegals, people that have entered the country illegally, and they have broken the law, and the bill that passed said you had to have insurance, and that's why lots of legislators voted for it. They thought this will get people insured. What happens is people are taking out a quick binder on their automobile, and as soon as they have the license in their hand, they cancel that. So it really did not do what it was designed to do. So that would make me think, no, I don't want to support that. On the other side, we have lots of nurseries in Oregon. It's been in the past one of our major crops. We do lots of agriculture. Marion County and Polk County are big in agriculture. We need those people to work. There is no question. You know, I picked in the berry fields for a long time, and have done that many times. But there aren't people today that are willing to go out and pick crops and help us and prune and landscape, and it sounds like I'm above that. I'm not, but I think that is a fact.
You know, driver's licenses for whatever you want to call them, illegal, undocumented citizens, whether people are here illegally or not, I think that if they're driving on the roads, they should be legal drivers, and they should have to pass a test to drive. I mean, I for one wouldn't want to just blanketly say if you're here illegally you can't have a driver's license, because, well, it just makes the road more dangerous for the rest of us. But we do need to solve the problem, because people who are here illegally, I mean, that's a bigger problem than driver's license. I think we need to solve that problem first. What the legislature did in terms of giving driving privileges to people who are here illegally was not the best. They, like Kathy said, you know, with the insurance loophole, they also extended it to people with CDLs. It just wasn't thought through, and that's what concerns me about some of the things that they pushed through the legislature lately, is that they really don't think things through. And I would hope that any of us here sitting at this table today, if elected, would try to you know, make some of these bills a little bit more comprehensive in terms of, you know, when they're implemented, are they really going to be effective? And that just isn't happening today.
I think that, unfortunately, the Democratic Party is setting up a privileged class in the illegal aliens. I think everybody probably heard today that Obama is in the process of actually releasing 36,000 convicted felons out of prison just because they're illegal aliens. If you go to Mexico and you try to get a license in Mexico, you have to actually have somebody from the government come to your house so they know that you live there, take a picture of you, and take a thumbprint, and also documentation in order to get a driver's license in Mexico. And now all of a sudden here in the United States, we're going to turn around and say, hey, you know what? You're here illegally. We're already giving you all these social services. We're letting you out of jail. Come on, drive on our roads too. We need to put a stop to this. We need to use common sense in making sure that we hold people accountable to the laws. If we allow people to continue to break the laws, what good are they? And that's a whole part of the process that I see, is that we need to enforce the law. We need to make sure that people are driving legally. And I believe that, as in many other states, we need to make sure that they're able to produce evidence that they're actually a citizen and that they live in the state.
My turn? Okay. But before I answer this question, which I'll have a very direct answer to, I just want to clarify a couple things. Number one, I didn't say the economy was going great. It is going great for the top 1% that have increased wealth 115% since 1980. But for the rest of folks, I agree it's not going great, but there are some things that aren't terrible. That's what I'm saying. When you get to the driver's license issue, I was actually working for Governor Kulingoski as a senior policy advisor when this whole thing started, because the Bush administration put into something called the Real ID Act, which, you want to talk about dumb-headed legislation, that one was dumb-headed, because we had to make it work at the states. Idaho, in fact, threatened to leave the union over that one, which was kind of funny to watch. The point is, on this particular bill, the driver's license bill, I actually think it's the right thing to do. It's right for our farmers. It's right for the businesses. It's right for the workers that are trying to get to the job. And more importantly, when it comes to public safety, though I know a lot about making war, I claim to know a little bit about public safety. I take my lead from the Portland police chief, who's endorsing it. I take my lead from the sheriffs and the police chiefs and the public safety community that believe it's better that at least we know that they can drive, and that we know, theoretically anyway, where they are. Right now, people without this are driving anyway. That's the point. Thank you.
We're going to start with Mr. Owens. What is your position on lawmakers who know little about technology making laws about technology? That's what someone wrote.
Oh, well, you know, I think we have a great example of that with the Cover Oregon debacle that we all witnessed in the last couple of months here. We've spent, I think, almost $250 million on a website that is junk. You know, I am pretty sure there are a handful of students, at least in this room, that could put together a website as a class project in half the amount of time for, you know, what, a couple $1,000s maybe. So, you know, yeah, do I think that legislators should be voting on technical issues? Well, they have to, for one. That's, I suppose, what, you know, testifying, you know, expert witnesses in hearings and stuff is like, or is for. But yeah, I mean, I think we've recently seen a great example of why the government should have a little bit more transparency and accountability when it comes to implementing technology projects.
Well, obviously, I agree that they should have a good technology understanding, and that's the reason why I'm running. The whole process that we're looking at as we move into the future involves technology. The more you look farther out in the future, the more technology is going to play a part in politics as well as the economy. Unfortunately, you can't always rely on expert witnesses. You really have to have somebody who understands the processes, understands what's actually happening, so that they can, you know, call them on the carpet and say, I'm sorry, but unless you can really define that a little further, I'm not going to accept that. That's a part of the problem that we had at Cover Oregon, is that we didn't have any politicians that understood technology at all. And frankly, most of you graduating in computer science the lights would have went off as soon as you heard the first proposals and the first report on progress. Anybody who has a computer background would have known that it was bogus. The fact that they were able to pull the wool over the entire legislature goes back to the fact that, yes, people need to have more technology understanding so that they can move our state in the right direction.
I'm a Democrat, and I'm mad at Cover Oregon. But I'm actually mad for some reasons that are supplemented by everybody else's. I'm agreeing on all fronts on this. But I'm mad because the folks that made the decision actually weren't, many of them weren't politicians, but they were certified smart guys and gals who had a particular different motive in mind. And I want to remind people that the camel, at least according to myth, was the result of a committee that was trying to build a horse. And that sometimes we have to remember what we're trying to do. And in public service, what you need is you need experienced people that are in the process. When I talk experience, I'm not an IT guy, but I can go find smart IT guy. I do know how to ask the right questions. You learn how to ask the right questions for public goals when you serve on the city council, when you serve as a mayor, when you serve as a school board member, when you're involved in the process of actually having to take public goals that reflect many different values and trying to find the most effective way of getting it across. Many of the things that happened could have been stopped, should have been stopped. I think there's plenty of blame to go to Oracle, who was plenty too happy to accept more and more change orders. But the responsibility goes to the person at the top. And I agree with you on this, where there has to be some accountability. But the bottom line is, Terrence is absolutely right about the role of technology in the 21st century. We have to have a better governing process. One of the things I recommend for all policies, all legislation, is a sunset clause. You want to fix government over the long term? Every 3 to 4 years, make every bill come up and have to be justified again. Because a lot of those programs, a lot of those decisions, a lot of those pieces that were part of the Cover Oregon matrix were there because they'd been there for so long.
I have real strong feelings about this. So the legislature isn't the individual that goes down, that knows how the widget goes together with every piece. The legislature we have is to write policy. To give you an example, I used to run the Moe's restaurants along the coast. I'm sure most of you have been there at one time or another for clam chowder. We didn't have enough oysters, so I started an oyster farm. Now, there isn't any legislators that know what kind of algae I should feed those oysters, or where I should buy them, or how deep I should hang them, or anything else. They write policy for aquaculture. And it doesn't take a legislator that knows every single thing about all these things that government does. I agree with them, it was a real fiasco, but it was because there was not adequate policy that was written in the first place that identified what needs to be done to start an IT. And by needs to be done, I don't mean which parts need to be done. I mean that we put it out for bid, that we go through things, we make sure the bidders are restricted to a group that has proven knowledge of things. Then we have stops, we do it piece by piece. That all is a policy matter. And that can be done without knowing that you're individually an IT person. Thank you.
So that concludes our questions because we're running out of time. Now we'd like to give you the opportunity, 2 minutes to, if you have any closing statements that you'd like to make, and then we'll have a closing statement from Travis Mavison, the ASBU president. So Mr. Taylor, would you start us off?
Sure. Since nobody asked, I'm going to tell you what we can do to help increase jobs and bring jobs into the state. There's 3 other states right now that are practicing this. They have 1 to 2 people that their only job at the state is to recruit companies into the state. And what they do is they give them a moratorium on a portion of their taxes. So as they come into the state and they hire people, they're able to get tax recovery from the people that they hire, and then 3 to 4 years down the line, they get the total tax recovery. And this is why Texas and several other countries, they think they're a country, states, are doing so well is because they've taken an active part in doing this. We can do this in Oregon. We have a great climate for agriculture, for technology, for higher paying jobs. We just need somebody that knows how to make these things happen and put them in the legislature.
Mr. Evans.
Okay. I just want to thank everybody for coming out again today. Hopefully this is the first of many opportunities to get together and talk about different issues. I know that Terrence and I, we got probably 1 or 2 of the questions we wanted to, and there's more that I know that hopefully will come up. Bottom line is I want people to understand a couple things. Number 1, however you decide to vote after you look at all of the alternatives, thank you for being involved in the process and thank you for voting. Yesterday, or at least this past week, India had 500 million people vote in their elections, and they were able to pull it off without people getting shot, people getting in too much trouble. I always am excited when there's an election campaign that involves ballots, not bullets, and I'm just excited to be a part of it this time. The last thing I want to emphasize is that as we look at these solutions, I'm running for the legislature. I don't pretend to be a business person. My dad was a business person for 17 years. I am a person who has served and has leadership experience making some of the hard decisions and bringing people together across party lines. Government is not the solution, and it's not a devil. Government is a facilitator, and hopefully we can move forward together and try to work and build a stronger economy that's better for everybody, and I hope to play a part. Thank you.
I also want to thank each one of you and the organization that put this together and the students that attended and the community members. I think it's a positive thing. I personally feel I have a doctorate in education administration. I've been a school superintendent, I've taught, I've been a principal. I've gone all the way up that ladder. I do know education, but I also wavered off, and you may find that you do that too. We don't all end up at the profession we set out to have. And I ended up as a general manager for Moe's Newport Pacific. and that's the most restaurants, the oyster farms, and we also had other restaurants at the time. So I absolutely know business and I know education. And it seems to me those are two major, major problems that we have in Oregon right now. And I would love the opportunity to address those. I want to apply my skills, my experience, and my common sense to helping all of Oregon. Thank you very much for listening. I'm Kathy Goss, District 20.
I'd also like to thank the Associated Students of Western Oregon University for putting this together. I think it's a great forum, and you know, students here are really the future. I think I represent that as a younger Republican, and I think we can take this party in a new direction if there are any Republicans out there. I don't know. You know, it's education, healthcare, veterans issues. You know, those are very important to me. I think we need to make government more transparent, more accountable. We've ran into some real problems with our state government in the last few years. Our economy is pretty much stalled, and we need to get it moving again. And I think I have some great ideas to get that going. So, number one, please do vote. Your vote matters. You got to get it in by Tuesday. And number two, you know, read up on all of us. My website's owensfororegon.com, but make an informed decision.